Let me ask you something. Why are people born between 1976 and 1985 so different? Not loud like millennials, not rigid like boomers, not fully digital like Gen Z, but somehow more adaptable than all of them. They are called Xennials, the micro-generation between Generation X and Millennials. And psychologically, they are the most underestimated minds in America. They grew up analog, but dominated digital. Xennials remember life before the internet. They passed notes in school. They memorized phone numbers. They used payphones. They rewound VHS tapes. Then suddenly, the world exploded into email, smartphones, and social media. Unlike millennials who were raised with tech, and unlike Gen X who had to force themselves to adapt, Xennials evolved with the technology. That single difference created a unique psychological wiring. They are cautious, but innovative, skeptical, but curious, independent, but collaborative, because they remember both worlds. They instinctively understand how humans behave before and after social media changed everything. That gives them a rare social advantage, but it also creates an invisible internal conflict. The split identity effect. Psychologists often describe Xennials as bridge minds. They can talk to boomers at work. They can relate to millennials culturally. They understand Gen Z humor, but inside, they often feel like they don't fully belong anywhere. Too young to be classic Gen X, too old to feel fully millennial. This creates something powerful. Adaptive intelligence. They constantly scan rooms. They read social cues fast. They adjust communication styles automatically, but adaptation has a cost. When you're always the bridge, you rarely feel like the destination. And that silent tension shapes their decisions in career, relationships, and money in ways most people don't see. The hidden pressure they carry. Xennials were teenagers during economic uncertainty, young adults during 9/11, building careers during the 2008 crash. They were hit with crisis after crisis at critical identity-forming years. This produced a psychology built on quiet resilience, realistic optimism, controlled risk-taking. They don't chase hype. They calculate. They don't trust easily. They verify. And that's exactly why many of them rise steadily, not loudly. If they're so adaptable, so resilient, so socially intelligent, why do so many Xennials feel stuck right now? Why do they report higher burnout than older generations, but less emotional expression than younger ones? There's a psychological pattern behind this, and almost nobody is talking about it. Here's something most people don't realize about Xennials. They didn't just grow up between two generations. They grew up between two expectation systems. On one side, the rugged independence mindset of Generation X. Figure it out yourself. No one is coming to save you. Work hard. Stay quiet. On the other side, the expressive, purpose-driven mindset of millennials. Follow your passion. Talk about your feelings. Find meaning in your work. Now imagine being wired by both. That psychological combination created something powerful and heavy, the old soul child effect. Many Xennials were latchkey kids. They came home to empty houses, cooked their own meals, solved their own problems. They matured early, but here's the hidden cost. When a child learns independence too soon, they often develop a subconscious belief, if I don't handle it, no one will. That belief follows them into adulthood. At work, they overperform. In relationships, they overgive. In families, they become the emotional stabilizer. They don't complain, they just handle it, quietly. The bridge builder burnout. Remember how Xennials can speak both analog and digital? That same ability makes them the default mediators. At work, they translate between older leadership and younger teams. At home, they balance traditional values and modern expectations. In society, they understand both skepticism and activism. They become the bridge. But bridges don't get celebrated. They get walked on. This creates what I call invisible responsibility syndrome. They feel responsible for outcomes that aren't even fully theirs. If a project fails, they should have prevented it. If family tension rises, they should have managed it. If finances feel unstable, they should have prepared better. Notice the pattern. Internal pressure, external calm, the achievement without applause. Problem unlike boomers, who had clear career ladders, or millennials who openly discuss burnout. Xennials often succeed quietly. They build stable lives. They earn respect. They accumulate experience, but they rarely broadcast it. And in the social media era, silence feels invisible. That invisibility slowly creates doubt. Am I behind? Did I choose wrong? Should I be further by now? Even when they're objectively doing well. The hidden fear. Xennials are afraid of becoming irrelevant, not because they lack skill, But because they see how fast culture moves, they remember a world where experience guaranteed authority. Now they live in a world where attention guarantees authority. And that shift feels unstable, so they work harder, adapt faster, learn constantly. But inside, they're tired. And this exhaustion isn't from weakness. It's from carrying responsibilities they never consciously chose. But here's the deeper question. If Xennials are so responsible, so adaptable, so quietly resilient, why do they struggle to ask for help? Why do they hesitate to take bold risks even when they're capable? Xennials are one of the most adaptable age groups alive. They survived dial-up internet. They adapted to smartphones. They moved from resumes to LinkedIn. From face-to-face networking to Zoom rooms, they evolved through every shift. But despite that adaptability, many of them hesitate when it's time to take bold, visible risks. Why? The stability imprint. Think about their timeline. They were entering adulthood during 9/11, launching careers during the 2008 financial crash, building families during economic uncertainty. Unlike millennials who were still finding identity during crisis, and unlike Generation X who were already established, Xennials were forming their core beliefs right in the middle of instability. That creates a psychological imprint. Security is survival. So they optimize for safety. They choose stable careers over flashy ones. They build steady income over risky leaps. They plan carefully instead of jumping early. From the outside, that looks responsible. But inside, there's often a quiet voice asking, what if I could have done more? The competence trap. Xennials pride themselves on competence. They don't need hand-holding. They learn fast. They fix problems. But competence can become a cage. Because when you're known as the reliable one, you get promoted into responsibility, not visibility. You become the operations brain, the steady manager, the crisis solver, not always the bold visionary. And over time, that shapes identity. I'm the stable one. I'm the practical one. I'm not the risk taker, even if that's not fully true. The social media discomfort. There's another factor most people miss. Xennials remember a time when privacy was normal. Embarrassing moments disappeared. Opinions weren't archived forever. Success didn't require self-promotion. Now we live in a world driven by algorithms. Visibility equals opportunity. And that creates friction. They understand digital platforms. They use them, but emotionally, they often feel uncomfortable performing online. So they underleverage their experience. They stay competent, but quiet.
Meanwhile,
louder voices, sometimes less experienced, dominate attention, and that can slowly erode confidence. The internal split. Part of them wants stability. Part of them wants expansion. Part of them values privacy. Part of them knows visibility creates leverage. Part of them feels grateful for what they've built. Part of them wonders if they settled too early. That tension doesn't explode dramatically. It simmers. And that simmering is what creates midlife restlessness. Not crisis, but recalibration. But here's the question that changes everything. What if their caution isn't weakness? What if their hesitation isn't fear? What if it's actually a hidden strategic advantage? Misunderstood even by them? The very traits Xennials think are holding them back might be the exact traits that give them long-term dominance. Let's zoom out. We're living in an era of information overload. Short attention spans, emotional reactivity, fast hype cycles. What wins long term? Not noise, not speed, not trend chasing, stability, pattern recognition, emotional control. And that's where Xennials are different. They understand before and after. They remember life before algorithms shaped attention. They watched the rise of platforms. They saw how culture shifted. They experienced how news cycles accelerated. Unlike millennials who grew up inside the digital wave, and unlike Generation X who had to adapt later, Xennials evolved alongside the system. That gives them something rare: perspective. They don't get emotionally hijacked by every trend. They've seen cycles repeat, and psychologically, that builds calm decision-making under pressure. In chaotic environments, calm wins. The emotional regulation edge Xennials were raised before constant digital validation. No instant likes, no dopamine notifications, no public follower counts in high school, so their self-worth developed more privately. Now compare that to younger generations who grew up being constantly measured. Xennials can operate without applause. That means they can build quietly while others burn out chasing attention. And in a world addicted to stimulation, the person who can delay gratification has an unfair advantage. The pattern recognition brain, because they've lived through multiple economic cycles. They don't panic easily. They remember the dot-com crash. They remember the 2008 collapse. They remember housing swings and job market resets. Each crisis strengthened one psychological muscle, long-term thinking. They don't just ask, what works now? They ask, what will still work 5 years from now? That shift alone separates trend followers from builders. The strategic silence factor. Silence isn't weakness, it's observation. Xennials watch before they move. They gather data, they calculate risk, and when they finally act, it's usually measured, not impulsive. That's why many of them don't explode overnight, but they rarely disappear either. They rise steadily, and steady often beats flashy. The realization they haven't fully had yet. The world is shifting again. AI, automation, economic restructuring, remote work, another transition era. And who thrives in transitions? People who've already survived several. The same bridge building, adaptability, and quiet resilience that once felt like pressure might now be leverage. But there's still one final mental shift missing. One psychological adjustment that unlocks everything. Because adaptability alone isn't enough. Responsibility alone isn't enough. Experience alone isn't enough. Here's the truth Xennials rarely hear. You were never meant to just hold things together. You were meant to direct where things go. But there's one psychological upgrade required. And it's simple. Stop proving. Start positioning. The core problem. For years, Xennials built their identity around competence. They became dependable, crisis-ready, emotionally stable, influenced by the independence of Generation X and the ambition of Millennials. They learned, if I do excellent work, I'll be recognized. That was true in older systems. It is not fully true now. Today's environment rewards visibility, clear positioning, authority signals, narrative control. And this is where many Xennials hesitate, not because they lack skill, but because they equate visibility with ego. That belief is outdated. The final trick, strategic visibility. Visibility is not arrogance. It is leverage. When you hide your experience, you shrink your impact. When you articulate your pattern recognition, you create authority. When you share frameworks instead of just results, you become the reference point. You don't need to become loud. You need to become clear. Instead of saying, I'm good at what I do, say, here's what I've seen happen over 20 years, and here's what will likely happen next. That's leadership. Why this works psychologically. Xennials already have crisis memory, emotional regulation, cross-generational fluency, long-term thinking. That combination is rare. You understand analog trust. You understand digital scale. You understand economic cycles. Most people only understand one era. You understand multiple. That's strategic advantage. But advantages unused feel like frustration. The reframe that changes everything. You are not behind. You are calibrated. You are not invisible. You are underpositioned. You are not tired because you're weak. You're tired because you've been carrying systems instead of shaping them. The moment you shift from, I'll handle it, to, I'll direct it, everything changes. Career decisions, financial strategy, personal boundaries, confidence. The quiet truth. The next decade won't belong to the loudest generation. It will belong to the most integrated one. The ones who remember life before noise. The ones who adapted without losing depth. The ones who can translate between speed and stability. That's Xennials. And the final psychological edge. You don't need to become someone new. You just need to stop playing support in a world that's ready for your leadership. If this made you see yourself differently, that wasn't accidental. Most people scroll for entertainment. A few watch for awareness. But the rare ones, they watch to evolve. If you're a Xennial, or even trying to understand one, you're standing at a psychological advantage most people don't even recognize yet. Now listen carefully. This channel isn't about hype. It's about hidden patterns. The mental shifts that quietly change your trajectory. So if you're ready to stop playing small and start thinking strategically, hit subscribe and press the bell icon, because the next video might not just change how you see the world. It might change how the world sees you.